Alright, we are live streaming. So, the meal chant. I will read it out and then I will talk about it and then we will have a group discussion. So the chant goes thusly. Buddha was born at Kapilavastu, enlightened at Magadha, taught at Varanasi, entered nirvana at Kushinagara. Now we set at Buddha's own bowls, may we, with all living beings, realize the emptiness of the three wheels, giver, receiver, and gift. Varakana Buddha, pure Dharmakaya, Lokana Buddha, complete Sambhogakaya, Shakyamuni Buddha, myriad Nirmanakaya, Maitreya Buddha, next to be born, all Buddhas throughout space and time, lotus of the wondrous Dharma, Mahayana Sutra. Manjushri Bodhisattva, great wisdom, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, great activity, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, great compassion, all honored ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Mahaprajna Paramita. We reflect on the effort that brought us this food and consider how it comes to us. We reflect on our virtue and practice and whether we are worthy of this offering. We regard it as essential to keep the mind free from excesses such as greed. We regard this food as good medicine to sustain our life. For the sake of enlightenment, we now receive this food. First, this is for the three treasures. Next, for the four benefactors. Finally, for the beings in the six realms, may all be equally nourished. The first portion is to cultivate every evil. The second is to cultivate all good. The third is to free all beings. May everyone realize the Buddha way. So then we dive in and eat up, and then at the end of the meal, somebody says, abiding in this ephemeral world like a lotus in muddy water, the mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus, we bow to Buddha. So, that is a long version of the Soto Zen meal chant. Most of the time that is picked up on, we reflect on the effort that brought us this food and consider how it comes to us. But the longer version, in my own life, Beth and I at home, our meals together, we will randomly pick either the one we use here, which is from Therese Fitzgerald out of the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, or we'll dive into the three verses of this one, which are the last three verses. When I'm eating alone at home, I'll just do the whole of this because I think it's quite beautiful. Which I will be for the next few days because Beth's out of town, so I'll be doing this once or twice a day for the next 4 or 5 days. Why a meal chant? Why this long meal chant? Most obviously, there is a practice and a utility in having gathas scattered all over the place. You have them on the bathroom mirrors, so you say a little toothbrushing gatha. You have them on the wall above the kettle, so you have a little I'm boiling the kettle and making a pot of tea in the morning gatha. You have it by your shoes, so you have an I'm putting my shoes on so I can go outdoors and do something gatha. By the kitchen sink, all the rest of it. So these are calls to mindfulness, these are calls to awareness, and they're calls in some way to recognize the beauty and the interbeing of the world. Food, to me, is particularly special. We literally are, scientifically, what we eat. We literally are what we eat. And what we eat, in order for it to be beneficial, was once living. So life has been given up in order for us to live. So there's a real exchange going on when we eat, and it's deeper and richer than the proteins and the sugars and the fats and all the carbohydrates and everything are being digested and broken down and absorbed and made into me. Energetically, if you think about it, the way that pigs in this country are raised is utterly grotesque. They're screaming, they're being tortured, and they are smart. So the energy of that pig when it is slaughtered, it is a tortured animal. And this physical form has absolute conviction that the energy of that experience is captured within what we're eating. So at that level, we are energetically absorbing the energy. It's not just the raw matter, it's going right down into very subtle energy levels. So really pausing when we eat and taking real time to reflect on what's going on with this exchange, what's going on with the sacrifice that is presented to us, what's going on when we go through the motion of ingesting and then digesting and then manifesting this. I think that's really important and really precious, and a really deep way of directly experiencing dependent causation and the 12 links and all the rest of it. So the verse, Buddha was born at Kapilavastu, enlightened in Magadha, taught at Varanasi, entered Nirvana at Kushinagara. These are 4 places in northern India. Actually, they're not. Kapilavastu is in right at the south of Nepal. It's just over the border. But if you go to the north central India and then go halfway to the coast, they're all scattered around. And they were in a kingdom that is basically one kingdom that existed around the time of Buddha. So that's where he taught. So it begins by simply recognizing and acknowledging the history of the teacher who gave us this teaching. And these place names show up in all the sutras as we read them. Now we set out Buddha's own vows. So in the Soto Zen tradition, this will be recited when this ritualized oryoki style of eating, which is silent eating, that you have 3 bowls and they're laid out in a particular way, and it's very ritualized and it's a form of contemplation. So Buddha's own bowls refers to that. It refers to the idea of Buddha carrying around his bowl and begging. And so in that ritualized format, there's kind of that experience when receiving the food. This is inviting us, therefore, to enter that experience. Recognize this has been going on for a long time, and this really is a deep spiritual practice that has been going on and is deeply rooted in the tradition. May we, with all beings, realize the emptiness of the 3 wheels, giver, receiver, and gift. One of the most beautiful meal verses I know is actually out of the Bhagavad Gita. It's 4 lines taken out of the Bhagavad Gita, and the translation I know is by oh goodness, what's his name? Begins with a P. And he and Christopher Isherwood wrote this, did this together. But it goes as follows. Brahman is the ritual. Brahman is the offering. Brahman is the one who offers into the fire that is Brahman. Brahman is everything. We just have to see that Brahman is everything. In the same way, the emptiness of the 3 wheels, giver, receiver, and gift, is the same. We use this word emptiness, but emptiness is really a fullness. It's just there's a non-specificity in there. So obviously we're not going to use Brahman in a Buddhist verse, but it's kind of got some of the same valence to me. It's this wonderful richness of total non-separation of the food, the eater, and of the act of eating. Vairocana Buddha pure Dharmakaya, Lokana Buddha complete Sambhogakaya, Shakyamuni Buddha myriad Nirmanakaya. Vairocana, I'm not sure why these show up in this particular verse. Vairocana is reasonably well known, but really comes mostly out of the Tibetan tradition. Lokana Buddha, as best I can tell, is very much a Tibetan version of Buddha. So we got these Tibetan versions of Buddha, but the more important thing to me is pure Dharmakaya, complete Sambhogakaya, myriad Nirmanakaya. Pure Dharmakaya it's Brahman, it's emptiness, it's the unmanifest. It's what Tathagata is when Tathagata was asked, does a Tathagata exist after he dies? And refused to answer. It is an unanswerable question. Myriad Nirmanakaya, Shakyamuni Buddha was one. Maitreya Buddha will be one. There are many Buddhas wandering around throughout time. And the myriad is this manifestation, this showing up in physical form of this enlightened teaching being. Complete Sambhogakaya, this is the bliss body. This is an energy body. It's kind of ineffable, but it's like it's the other part of the Trinity, the Buddhist Trinity, and it's the energetic, action-based, bliss-based thing that isn't yet form, and it is it's halfway between manifest and unmanifest, or it's got an element of both in it. It's kind of hard to explain. Maitreya Buddha, next to be born, brings the time element in. All Buddhas throughout space and time. And then we have Lotus of the Wondrous Dharma, Mahayana Sutra, added to the list of Buddhas. If you read the Lotus Sutra, there are stupas set up all over the place. Actually, when Buddha died, the story is he was cremated, and there were 8 stupas built, and people were basically fighting over his ashes. And so the ashes went into the stupas, and then we had this period thereafter where all these relics showed up, finger bones and knuckles and all the rest of it. And all these stupas were built all over the place. But the Dharma, as manifest in the Lotus Sutra in particular, that would be kept in a place that was regarded as having equivalent sacred quality to a stupa. The Dharma is the body of Buddha. And if you think about it in a very real sense, it is the body of Buddha. That is the body he left us, the body of his teachings. So the Lotus Sutra itself, whether or not in written form, whether or not actually held in a stupa by an extrapolation, that teaching is a manifestation of Buddha. It is, in a sense, one of the myriad Nirmanakaya. And by many in the Lotus Sutra traditions, it's regarded that way. So, Lotus of the Wondrous Dharma, Mahayana Sutra. And then we have our list of 3 bodhisattvas, Manjushri, Samantabhadra, and Avalokiteshvara, representing wisdom on the one extreme and compassion on the other, which are the 2 we normally think of as the wings of awakening, wisdom and compassion. Awakening can't fly without those 2 wings. And then we have Samantabhadra, which is activity. And not talked about as much, doesn't show up on as many altars, certainly not in this country, but profoundly important. Profoundly important. If we go back to the Lotus Sutra, as an aside, in Zen Buddhism, most Zen Buddhists in this country don't talk about this. Most, I don't think, recognize it. Shunryu Suzuki delivered, who was the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center, the Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which was an ad hoc collection of his talks. Then there's Crooked Cucumber, which is talks on the Sandakai. But he also delivered a series of talks that were recorded and written, but they haven't been published in books, on firstly the Blue Cliff Record, which is one of the classic koan collections. It's actually a Rinzai collection mostly, and that's the distribution. And he delivered a series of talks on the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus Sutra features very heavily in Dogen's commentaries. It's a really pervasive and influential sutra. I bring the Lotus Sutra up because Samantabhadra features heavily in the Lotus Sutra. So this bodhisattva of activity, enlightened activity, the actual activity of being in the world, engaging in compassionate action, engaging in wise action, and doing it with a physical body. It's not just mind and heart, it's body and it's action. And Samantabhadra is the body and the action. All honored ones, Bodhisattva, Mahasattvas. Bodhisattva and Mahasattva usually go together. They're usually truncated, so it's hyphenated, because an enlightening being is a great being, and vice versa. Those 2 kind of go together. Wisdom beyond wisdom, Maha, Prajna, Paramita. I will not spend much time. I won't talk about Prajna Paramita. We can talk about it later if anyone's interested. We reflect on the effort that brought us this food and consider how it comes to us. These next 5 lines, if you were to pull up the verse that Therese uses, you'll find they parallel it very closely, so they're talking about the same thing. We reflect on the effort that brought us this food and consider how it comes to us. This food is the gift of the whole universe, the earth, the sky, and much hard work. Just recognizing it's the sun, it's the wind, it's the rain. And it's all the people, the farmers who cut it down and the people who cook the food and so forth. We reflect on our virtue and practice and whether we are worthy of this offering. May we be fully present to appreciate this meal. So there's this sense of us living a full and rich life and actually embodying what we've just talked about, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and that kind of activity. We regard it as essential. So the way I usually recite this is, we regard greed as the obstacle to freedom of mind. The words here are a little different. And in Teresa's version, may we shed light on our states of mind and learn to eat in moderation. Same thing. Be really thoughtful about what we eat and recognize we're not eating to enjoy food. We're eating simply to sustain this body so it can continue in the world as a bodhisattva's vehicle. It's a very practical thing, done with immense gratitude, but not to linger on the sensual pleasure of eating the food. We regard this food as medicine. I've done them in reverse order. Greed. It's kind of the same. So the next one, we regard this food as good medicine to sustain our lives. May we take only food that nourishes and prevents illness. It's the same flavor. I basically concatenated those two lines. For the sake of enlightenment, we now receive this food. May we receive this food to realize the way of understanding and love. I didn't get that quite right, but it's close. So again, this is the same flavor. We are deeply grateful for this food, for the opportunity to eat it, but it's so we can wake up and be of service, be of use in the world. First, this is for the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Next, for the four benefactors. So we're receiving this food in order to, firstly, embody the three treasures. Next, to appreciate the four benefactors. The four benefactors are parents, rulers, or government, I guess, in the modern society, parents, and then all beings. So appreciating those who have supported us. Finally, for the beings in the six realms. So you're all familiar with the six realms, but we're saving all beings, regardless of realm. May all be equally nourished. The next one, in this ritualized format, you have the three bowls out in front of you, and you say, the first portion is to end all evil. You stick your spoon in, and the end all evil is the first of the pure precepts. The next portion, the second portion, is to cultivate every good. You lay your chopsticks across the top. To cultivate every good is the second pure precept. The third is to free all beings. You lift your bowls up with the third one. The third is to free all beings, and that's the third pure precept, to try and live in an enlightened state. May everyone realize the Buddha way. And then you all eat slowly and mindfully. And when everybody's finished eating, in this tradition, somebody will go around and you will. So there's a ritual right at the end where you've got a bowl where they pour tea in, and you wash all your bowls and you wrap them all up. And with the very last bowl, which has still got a little bit of your tea that you've washed everything up in, they'll come round the front of all the tables, and you'll pour in a little bit of that tea water. And somebody will take that tea, that water, which is very thin. It's like a gruel because it's got all the dissolved food, but it's very thin. And they'll take that and they'll present it to the altar, and they'll pour it on. They'll present it and leave it on the altar, and they'll probably also leave like 3 or 4 grains of rice up there. And then somebody will say, abiding in this ephemeral world like a lotus in muddy water, the mind is pure and goes beyond us. We bow to Buddha. And that offering is to the hungry ghosts, because the hungry ghosts, they've got these very narrow throats, so they can't eat anything. They can't actually eat solid food, so that liquid has nutriment for the hungry ghosts. It's a rather beautiful tradition. But this is a way of wrapping it all up and kind of saying, okay, it's like, when I talk to people about meditation practice, the things that I will encourage people to do are on the front end, say something, maybe do some prostrations and say something, give yourself a little chant to bring energy and intention into your chant. Because if you don't, the junk that you dreamt about or the junk that happened at work, that will be what showed up. Let's be intentional about the energy we bring in, which we've done with the meal chant. And then on the end of it, when you've finished your meditation practice, metta chants, dedication of merit, something to take that energy, to intentionally bring that energy back out into the world. And that's what this little verse at the end here is doing. It's capping it off, acknowledging our participation in this ephemeral world and wanting to do something really worthwhile while we're here, which is participate in Save All Beings, and expressing that to take that back out into the world with us. So I think the meal chant, to spend a talk talking about the meal chant doesn't sound like a particularly rich and wonderful thing to do, but I think the meal chant is just really, really important. And I appreciate your patience and attention as we've talked through this. So let me push a couple of buttons.